Hello and welcome to Global Business Live from Nairobi. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's start with a look at the markets. The JSE closed lower on Friday, today of course, as U.S. employment data exceeded market expectations. The JSE all-share fell 0.44% to 57,575.22 points. Bullion shares fell 1.72%, with gold fields down 2.27% to 71.93 rand, and Anglo Gold Ashanti dropped 2.08% to 378.8 rand. Coming up on the show tonight, African leaders are making their way to Niger for a historical launch of the free trade area. India loses its spot as the world's fastest growing economy. And the demand from the Chinese market leads to a boom in Senegal's peanut industry. Africa is set to make history by launching a free trade area at the weekend. Ministers from across the continent are meeting in Niamey over the next 2 days. The deal aims to bring all 54 members of the African Union together in a single market by removing trade barriers such as tariffs across Africa.
The Africa Free Continental Trade Area looks to create a market worth $3.4 trillion. It is expected to boost regional trade and has the largest number of participating countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. It will be a market for 1.2 billion people.
Indeed, ZLECAf aims to intensify trade throughout the continent and ultimately to build an integrated continental market. It's a remarkable achievement and one that can be described as historic, in which the AU Commission, the Ministers of Trade, the regional economic communities, our traditional partners, and a battery of experts made available by member states have invested themselves with unparalleled dedication.
Talks on the agreement began back in 2002, but it officially came to life at the end of May after 22 countries ratified the treaty. On Tuesday, the FCTA was given a major boost when Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, announced that President Muhammadu Buhari would sign the agreement in Niamey.
Over the last 6 months, the Commission, in close collaboration with the Permanent Representatives Committee and experts from our member states, have continued to work tirelessly to make the implementation of the flagship projects identified by Agenda 2063 and in some cases officially launched since 2018 by the heads of state and government more readable.
The ongoing AU summit in Niamey will launch the operational phase of FCTA at the weekend, but observers caution key details still need to be thrashed out. Skeptics also fear the deal will negatively impact small manufacturers and family farms as borders are fully open to imports. At present, only 16% of trade by African nations is with continental neighbors. Chomgono, CGTN.
In Ghana, there's massive public outrage over plans to build a new 450-seat chamber for lawmakers at a cost of $200 million. Ghanaians are asking Parliament to justify why MPs need to spend so much money on a new chamber while sectors like education and healthcare delivery are still underfunded. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
The Speaker of Parliament, Professor Michael Okwe, last week unveiled the design of the new parliamentary chamber block. The building has room for about 450 lawmakers and would house other facilities, including diplomatic offices, a library, and a museum. The current chamber has just 275 seats for MPs. According to the Speaker, this does not mean the number of MPs will be increased, but is intended with an eye towards the future. However, this has caused public outcry, with the policy think tank Ghana Center for Democratic Development describing it as a misplaced priority. But the Majority Speaker of Parliament, Oseichi Mensah Bonsu, says there is a need for a new chamber as the current structure housing MPs is no longer fit for purpose following a 2011 increase in the number of MPs.
Because we have had to increase the number to 275, there's serious encroachment on space, such that even the walkways now have become extremely narrow, such that perish the thoughts if there should be any unfortunate incidents which would require the rushing out If we're not careful, it may result in a serious stampede, which may even perhaps result in the death of some members. You don't want to wait until such a thing happens.
Already, a campaign on social media with the hashtag #DropThatChamber is gathering momentum as many Ghanaians push for Parliament to abort its plans to build itself a new chamber. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
A look at your corporate headlines now. Africa's most valuable company, Naspers, has appointed a new chief executive for its South African unit. Phuthi Mahanyele-Dabengwa takes on the role and becomes the firm's first ever female and black CEO. Phuthi's appointment follows a long streak of white male executives leading the 104-year-old South African company. Row of an alleged conflict of interest. The insurer says Moyo and his legal team appear to be following a deliberate strategy. Their attempts to divert attention from the ex-CEO's own actions. Airtel Africa is set to list on the Nigerian bourse on Monday after the exchange postponed the listing, which had been scheduled for Friday. The Nigerian Stock Exchange has attributed the delay to a manual allotment process of transferring the shares to new investors. And finally, Megaphone, Russia's second biggest mobile phone operator, is considering selling real estate and some of its assets to reduce debt. Megaphone is currently drowning in about $5.7 billion of debt. It joins other Russian firms in scrapping overseas listings, citing high costs and limited investor appetite due to sanctions on Russia. And that's a wrap of your corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business. Coming up after the break. South African arms company Denel is sinking in debt. And Egypt hikes fuel prices in yet another round of austerity measures.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global Business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
All right, so as we mentioned at the top of the hour, Africa is set to make history by launching a free trade area at the weekend. Ministers from across the continent are meeting in Niamey over the next 2 days. And the deal aims to bring 54 members of the African Union together in a single market by removing trade barriers and such as tariffs across the continent. Now, Ramanyang is following this closely for us in Niamey. He joins us live from there. So Rama, good to see you. Very, very ambitious to assemble the world's biggest single free trade area by member states. What do companies expect to see from this?
Indeed. So the idea is, at least on paper, pretty simple, because as observers of African economies and economic history across the continent will be aware of, what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 decades is a steady consolidation of countries into regional economic blocs. So we've got the EAC, for instance, in East Africa, the Southern African Development Community. You've got ECOWAS, where we are at the moment in East Africa. The Sahelian countries as well also do have their own little economic bloc. And what these have all done is pretty much the same thing that the African Continental Free Trade Area intends to do, but on a much larger scale. So you harmonize rules of origin, you harmonize things like tariff schedules. What are we essentially going to allow into the bloc to trade amongst ourselves without any tariffs? What do we need to put tariffs on? What do we need to protect? And over what period of time? Our viewers are going to be hearing a lot of perspectives on this particular issue in the next 48 hours or so. But before we actually came here to Niamey, I sat down with the CEO of the Kenya Private Sector Association, Peninah Karibe, asked her that very same question. Here's what she had to say.
The rules need to be as simple. I need to feel how the Europeans feel. You know, you cross a border, it's like you're moving from Nakuru to Nairobi, you know. So it needs to be that simple, because what has made trade very expensive and very cumbersome is our borders. There's so much, the procedures are many, they are cumbersome to adhere to, and that has really affected that. But the second thing is to help us start sorting out, especially transport and infrastructure logistics, because that's the other big nightmare in Africa. I mean, I tell people when you're doing African airports, you just want to scream, you know, because even where it's not the infrastructure itself, it's the procedures and the rules that make it just so complex, you know, and that is terrible for business, you know. And so I think those are the things we're looking forward to, because the Kenyan business is saying we can do much more business, we can move regionally, we can move continental, but these are the challenges that we face. You know, we don't know what are the rules of origin in terms of how do we deal with the rules of origin, but we also don't know. We have all these challenges of transport and logistics that make it expensive. So I'd rather do business with Europe or I'd do business with China just because of that. If my goods are going to take twice as many days to get to Nigeria than to China, I'd rather take my avocado to China.
All right, so Caroline mentioned quite a number of issues, Brahma, but let's talk about the issue of protectionism, because that's really very real. For instance, here in Kenya, it has consistently shielded its sugar industry. So how does the new trade bloc intend to deal with this issue?
Indeed, and that really is the main issue at the heart of these negotiations around the Continental Free Trade Area. 25 countries have essentially signed up to this deal, so at least on paper, there are 25 countries across Africa that are willing and able at this point in time to say, you know what, we'd actually be much better specializing on what we're really good at, and not trying to shield sectors that are essentially uncompetitive and that are just soaking up billions of taxpayer dollars, which essentially is what has happened, particularly in the Kenyan case. Year after year after year, when COMESA members are meeting, the Kenyan authorities show up and they say, well, we'd like to have a safeguard, essentially to have import quotas in place and a fairly high tariff on sugar coming into the country, basically locking out this market of about 45 million people. And that's a significant problem. So that essentially is a question that I put to Peninah Karibe earlier on, and asked her, look, at the end of the day, it's all well and good for us to sit down and talk about opening up our borders to trade, but a lot of companies and a lot of politicians will be very uncomfortable with that idea. How do you solve it? This was our answer.
We could continue to choose and build our little villages and continue that way, which we were starting to do with our small blocks, or realize now the cake is much bigger and there's much more competition, you know. And so if you don't open up, if you don't shape up, you will ship out, you know. So Kenyan sugar will either decide we are completely cannot do sugar, and so we'll go, or we'll say no. Politically, a lot of them will not be economic. It's political, and we have to sit down as the leaders and say, what are we good at? What can we compete at? You know, that maybe now we've had the safeguards. Those safeguards will go.
All right, Rama. So we'll be touching base with you again in the coming days. Thank you very much for that update. Rama Nyang, live for us there in Niamey. Now, South Africa's Information Communication and Technology Union has announced its intention to challenge MultiChoice's plans to cut more than 2,000 jobs in court. The union says the retrenchments are unlawful, citing that the pay TV provider should stop forcing its employees to take voluntary severance packages. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has the details.
The ICTU delivered a petition to the MultiChoice board listing its demands, top of which was to investigate why the management team embarked on what the ICTU are calling an illegal retrenchment program.
The next step is that we are first waiting for management to respond in terms of our letter from the attorneys to stop retrenchments and forceful VSPs. Secondly, the next step will then be, if management has not yet responded, we'll therefore go to the court by tomorrow, to the Labour Court to interdict the process. Thirdly, the ICTU has sponsored this motion of discussion on retrenchment as a national crisis at SAFTU meeting, which will be sitting between the 8th and the 10th of July. We are expecting that there's going to be fireworks. SAFTU is going to now show its character on an issue of retrenchments.
While the country's unemployment levels are amongst the world's highest, investors are looking at their returns.
I'm not going to carry a candle for the workers that are being booted out of the call center, because back in the day, if your decoder wasn't working, you got on the telephone. You don't do that anymore. You use the mobile app. And of course, people are a bit cleverer these days than they used to be, so they're not having as many problems with the new technology. So that's just in the nature of things.
Investors want dividends. MultiChoice listed on the JSE less than a year ago. It presented its maiden results in June, with shareholders excited about its prospects. That's despite the retrenchments.
I'm a corporate shill over here. I'm an investor, so I like the idea of staff cost reductions, which mean that there's more cash flow to pay dividends. There was no dividend with the most recent set of results because they just came onto the market, but we've been told they're going to pay 6 rands a share in 2020, and that's where the money's got to come from.
The ICTU, in the meantime, has not given the MultiChoice board a deadline.
With respect to the issue of the board, we are giving the board space for them to contemplate what action, because this is an issue that in its nature, our complaint was saying we are requesting an investigation on why management has decided to embark on retrenching employees.
The battle lines have been drawn between the unions and management, and investors are watching from the sidelines to see what develops. Their bottom line is returns. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 in Johannesburg, South Africa.
South Africa's state defense company Denel has asked the government for a $200 million bailout. The cash injection is expected to help it emerge from a financial crisis and secure lucrative export deals. The firm is focused to win $2.1 billion in contracts if it receives financial help to keep it afloat. However, public finances are stretched under the current government following bailouts for state firms, as comments South African Airways. In 2018, Saudi Arabia's state defense firm SAMI made a $1 billion bid for a broad partnership. Denel is among the state firms which have been riddled by years of mismanagement during the tenure of former President Jacob Zuma. Angelo Coppola is following these developments for us and joins us live from Johannesburg for more on this. Angelo, Denel has asked the government for a 2.8 billion rand loan, that's about $197 million, cash injection to help it emerge from a financial crisis. But public finances, as we know, are stretched by the need to rescue other ailing SOEs, like we've mentioned, Eskom and the SAA. So is Denel likely to receive the entire lot it's asking for? And if yes, then what conditions are likely to be attached to this bailout?
Well, look, Peninah, they are probably going to get that money. Whether it's going to come in tranches or if it's going to come as one total amount is yet to be decided. In fact, you wouldn't have thought that National Treasury would come to the party when you consider that not so long ago they were very quiet when Denel announced that they won't be able to pay their staff their full salaries at the end of June. Denel had put a request in for that bailout, but of course you must remember that it's not to say that National Treasury are going to actually grant their wish. The Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, hasn't yet reacted to this request that was announced by Denel today. In terms of conditions, well, the CEO has a plan, and if there are any conditions, they're probably going to be linked to that plan that he's been implementing since he stepped into office very late last year, Peninah.
All right, so let's talk about that, what you've just mentioned. The CEO, Danny Dutoit, who says that recovery efforts are progressing well. What reforms has he instituted to achieve this?
Well, look, apparently he's done a complete strategic review of the business and all the linked operations that are tied into Denel, and there are lots of them. There's talk of a young, new and dynamic management team that's in place, and we understand that he's bringing back some sound corporate governance systems that had been dissipated in the last couple of years by a range of different boards and managers and CEOs. There's also a plan to get rid of the non-core assets. Although these haven't been clearly identified just yet, Dutoit has also brought in an independent group of auditors to sort out the technical financial issues that are facing the company and put some IP in place to help the company manage its finances a bit better. So there's lots of work being done across the entire business, Peninah.
So Denel says it will exit some loss-making businesses, Angelo, and forge partnerships to bolster others. Do we know which investors it's targeting in these deals?
Well, look, there's little to no business in the public domain at the moment. The loss-making businesses include, we know, at least one ammunition business that is costing the company millions of rands to keep operating, so that's likely to go quite soon. In terms of growth, well, it's got a potential pipeline, as you mentioned, of around $2 billion, but those are leads. It's not deals, and it's nothing that's been signed yet. So we're not quite sure why the bailout is linked to this new business opportunity. That hasn't been made clear just yet. So there is some interest, we know, in the Middle East in terms of new business. You'll recall, of course, that Denel does a lot of work and has done for many years work in the Middle East with a range of countries, including Saudi Arabia. There are plans to develop that business further, to grow it some more. In terms of forging partnerships, they will look at any kind of partnership and that's going to allow them to enter into new markets and where they can be reasonably assured, as they put it, of gaining new business. But they're going to, and they made this very clear, only enter those partnerships on their own terms and not be dictated to by others.
And finally, Angelo, earlier on, there were reports that some strategic partners were interested in the venture. Have there been any developments on this end?
Well, you mentioned earlier the Saudi Arabian state defense firm that was interested and put that offering of around $1 billion. That was late last year. It's thought, as you mentioned, to be a broad partnership, but it's also understood that that deal the Saudis were quite keen on that deal because they would be able to then get their hands on Denel's 49% stake in Rheinmetall Denel Munition. This is a joint venture between Rheinmetall Waffe, which designs and makes a range of ammunition and artillery shells in South Africa. That fell through, obviously. At the time, President Ramaphosa did say that there were several other suitors that were interested, but nothing came of that. And since then, it appears that government's done a U-turn, and it now isn't interested in too many of these equity stakes being handed out or sold off. And it seems instead that Ramaphosa and the government are quite keen to put their faith in the new CEO and allow him to try and turn Denel around. So we're going to be watching that quite closely over the next couple of months, Peninah.
All right, Angelo, thank you for that update. Angelo Kupler live in Johannesburg. Let's move to Egypt now, which has increased fuel prices in its latest round of subsidy cuts and a reform package agreed with the International Monetary Fund. The new pricing, which officially came into effect on Friday, is the fifth and final hike as the North African economy prepares to receive the last $2 billion tranche from the monetary body. Let's get more details on this from Yasser Hakim. He's live for us in Cairo. Yasser, what has been the reaction to this news?
Yes, obviously there is the satisfaction. A rise in the fuel prices. It does not only mean a rise in fuel prices, but also in other products. For example, transportation costs and public transportation costs has increased by 15%. According to the Chamber of Investments, the prices of products that are produced in Egypt will increase from an average 2% to 20%, depending on the cost of energy in the industrialization process. Heavy energy consumption factories will see an increase of their products by 20%. Low in consumer energy consumer factories, energy consumption factories will see 2 to 5% increase in prices of their manufactured goods. So it's not about just fuel prices going up, but it does affect the whole market. But it's not a surprise for Egyptians. The government has been saying this for the last 3 years, that every year it will be cutting subsidies on fuel products and oil products and petroleum products as well. And that even a few weeks before the decision was taken on Friday, it has been going with a campaign, a media campaign, explaining how important it is to cut the fuel and energy subsidies, because it's good for the economy, it's good for the budget, and so forth. So the government has been giving the public some information ahead that this will happen. Therefore, it was not a surprise.
So the information is good to the public, Yasser, but going by the numbers you've listed there, this is obviously going to hit hard the middle class and low-income earners. So the question is the government providing some kind of cushion to protect against shocks in energy and other commodity prices?
Yes, Peninah, there's been a new state budget that has been adopted on July 1st, because the fiscal year begins in Egypt on July 1st every year. And this new budget has included an increase in salaries, in pensions by about 20%, an increase in minimum wage by about 70%. And then there's also an increase in the budget for the social welfare projects for the poor and the low-income earners, the budget for the subsidies on food. So the money has been taken off subsidies for energy and have been partly put in food subsidies for the poor. And therefore, these new measures are hopefully hoping to balance a bit the effects of the increase in fuel prices. And these new salaries and pensions with the higher salaries have been adopted on the 1st of July, so it's already been adopted this month. And the government is trying to, at the same time, put more emphasis on the new social and health insurance program that is also been adopted this year, as well as the educational budget for the education and health systems that are also in the government. So there are several aspects where the government is trying to balance out this to try to alleviate the burdens of the new prices on the Egyptians, especially the low-income earners.
All right, Yasser, thank you very much for that. Yasser Hakim, live there in Cairo. And this is Global Business. We're taking a short break. Coming up. India loses its sport as the world's fastest growing economy. And Mexico eyes a growing love for tequila in China.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Let's take a look at the top stories of the day. Celebrations have ensued across Sudan after the ruling military council and a coalition of opposition members reached an agreement to share power during a transition period. However, protest groups have warned that if the agreement is not implemented, they will go back to the streets. Africa is set to make history through the launch of the free trade area as the African Union leaders meeting kicks off in Niamey, Niger. The free trade area aims to bring together members of African Union into a single market. Iran's elite revolutionary guards have warned of the seizure of a British oil tanker if an Iranian tanker detained in Gibraltar is not released. British Royal Marine seized the supertanker Grace 1 for trying to take oil to Syria in violation of EU sanctions. The nature of the cargo and its ultimate destination is yet to be established. And that's a look at the day's top stories. Fresh data shows that the Indian economy grew 5.8% in the final quarter of the fiscal year 2018-2019, bringing overall GDP growth to a 5-year low of 6.8%. CGTN spoke to some Indian economists to find out why the country has lost its place as the world's fastest growing economy.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his team are welcomed to their second term with bad news of a slowing economy. The new numbers released show that the Indian economy has grown at its slowest pace in the last 5 years at 6.8%.
Investment has been absolutely declining. That's not the sign of a booming economy. So everyone who looked just at GDP, they should have asked themselves, how can GDP grow so fast if investment is declining? And investment decline has many bad implications. It's bad for future growth, of course, but it also suggests that there's insufficient demand in the economy.
One of the major reasons for declining demand is unemployment. The figures released by the government show that joblessness is at 6.1%, which is the highest in last 4 decades.
The key driver of the slowdown is, of course, the private final consumption expenditure, which is now visible in the rural areas because of the rural distress, and even in the urban areas because the income growth is not happening at the same pace as it was happening earlier. So all of these is resulting in people spending less.
Economists say that the government needs to kickstart demand generation immediately through employment generation. That's where industry comes in, who wants the government to re-energize the engines of growth and pump the economy.
We need money to invest, and the money to invest is not there because of the high interest rate and the lack of capital here. So the finance ministry would also need to recapitalize some of the public sector banks, merge and amalgamate some of the banks to ensure that onward lending takes place.
As the industry demands, the government has set a 100-day agenda rolling. In the next few weeks, India will see some new economic reforms. Privatization of state assets and changes in labour and land rules are in the offing to support businesses. Ravinder Bawa, CGTN, Delhi.
In an emirate known for luxury and excess, one startup is taking its future on making second-hand items stylish. Dubai-based e-commerce firm The Luxury Closet is emerging as a regional disruptor by offering an outlet for people to buy and sell their pre-owned high-end products, as CGTN's Jacob Greaves now explains.
Amid Dubai's big spenders, The Luxury Closet is trying to make second-hand vogue. The e-commerce firm now has 2 pop-up stores in the emirate and has just expanded to nearby Kuwait. But the region provides both customers and stock.
So it's very high per capita spend on luxury. It's high-end items in their closets. So it's a great market for luxury. Of course, for us that means that it's a great closet to unlock. And the willingness to sell is great because they also want to refresh their closet. So for us, we see a fantastic amount of supply. We see very good demand as well. However, we see more supply than demand in the region.
Discounted designer handbags are a big hit, but marketing them to Gulf clients takes a unique approach.
Whilst the concept of pre-owned is fairly established elsewhere in the world, here in the Gulf it's still relatively new. For companies like this, part of the challenge is changing consumer attitudes to the idea of second-hand products.
Instead of pre-owned, there's terms like pre-loved.
This is why we also opened boutiques and pop-ups in malls to bring this awareness as well, and to show that the pre-owned is not only about used and whatever you don't wear anymore, but can be rare pieces, can be very expensive pieces. Whatever you find on this display is mainly Chanel, is exotic skins, is items that are very rare.
The Luxury Closet isn't the only Dubai fashion disruptor taking advantage of the digital space. Others appeal to more environmentally conscious younger generations keen to recycle. And different economic conditions might also be weaving new trends. Gulf countries are no longer enjoying unfettered oil-fueled growth. Add to that the recent introduction of VAT. Jacob O'Brien, founder of the Arab Fashion Council, which helped bring a fashion week to the region, says social media and spending power is changing consumer behaviour.
The consumer is becoming more westernized in terms of what is the trend in Europe, and the States is becoming also a trend here. They start to be very conscious when it comes to spending. Not only because of the decline, of course, of the budget in terms of spending on one item. Every influencer looks perfect on social media. They feel that they have the perfect life, and people, they want to be the same. So if they can't afford being the same as the influencers, they are looking at other methods how to be the same. Then the pre-loved items, the vintage market, which has been always there in Europe. Everyone used to wear vintage. Now people start to explore more and to browse more into this vintage markets.
As for the Luxury Closet, it already has a global client base, but is now eyeing Asia via a collaboration with a Hong Kong e-commerce site. Dubai's fashion footprint might be taking on a new look. Jacob Greaves for CGTN in Dubai.
Still in the world of fashion, the French government has announced sweeping reforms to combat the staggering amount of waste generated by the industry. The new regulations prohibit apparel brands and retailers from discarding or incinerating unsold items. Elena Casas explains.
Gaëlle Constantini is a Paris fashion designer who aims to make perennially stylish clothes customers will buy and wear. The fabric she uses is recycled and would otherwise have ended up in the bin, including used sheets from the Paris Ritz Hotel and old curtains from the French Senate.
Il y a énormément de déchets qui sont faits par ce qu'on porte plus.
Fashion produces enormous amounts of waste, from throwing out the things we don't wear anymore, but also from the production of the fabric, the dyeing, the growing of cotton. It's all very polluting. So I just thought, let's use fabric that already exists, and that way we can reduce the amount of waste textiles on the planet.
Voilà, c'est tout ce processus, en tout cas, qui produit.
Gaëlle doesn't recycle clothes from many fashion brands. She says the fabric from high street stores is too poor quality. Upmarket fashion names often prefer to destroy unsold stock than recycle it to protect the exclusivity of their brand. The summer sales are well underway here in France. In a survey last year, 56% of clothes brands said they got rid of all unsold stock this way, but 13% admitted to destroying some of it. Under the new law, burning or throwing away unsold clothes will be illegal by 2021. The government is determined to make designer names change their ways.
In Parliament, there will be a discussion, a debate with all the members of Parliament of France so that we come up with sanctions and fines that are actually high enough to deter them from keeping the destruction. You know, the objective at the end of the day is to make sure that all the things that they did not manage to sell are actually given out to people who need it.
The new law doesn't just apply to clothes. It would also ban throwing away unsold household goods and appliances and aims to force manufacturers to make products that are easy to repair and last longer. This workshop offers a repair service for all sorts of household goods.
We're really trying to repair everything we can so we don't throw things away. So that could be toasters, hairdryers, vacuum cleaners, which often only need dusting or a small piece changing when people were going to throw them out.
The new law aims to force manufacturers to pay the costs of transporting and treating their unwanted goods and encourage consumers to reuse, repair and recycle instead of shopping. Elena Casas, CGTN, Paris.
Mexican tequila has been gaining popularity among Chinese drinkers in recent years. Mexican distillers are also expanding in the Chinese market in hopes of China becoming the world's biggest consumer of tequila. Here are the details.
Tequila, a spirit distilled from the agave plant, comes from the heart of Mexico. The drink is ubiquitous throughout its home country, yet international markets are taking an ever greater interest in the spirit. Rodolfo González is the president of the National Tequila Industry Council.
Sí, la verdad es que el tequila es el embajador de México en el mundo.
Tequila is an ambassador for Mexico on the world stage. Today, tequila reaches more than 120 countries worldwide and is a product which is growing in international markets.
Mexico's tequila exports have risen by an average of 4% year on year for almost a decade. And last year, the country exported 211 million litres. The vast majority of those exports land in the United States, but exporters are also looking to widen their reach, particularly in China, where sales were up 38% last year over the previous 12 months.
When it comes to China, José Cuervo Especial, an industrially produced tequila, dominates all brands with more than 50% of the market share. Yet some more artisanal producers like Orendain say they see an opening for Chinese customers who have developed a taste for the spirits and are seeking higher-end products.
Pedro Ruiz is a master distiller at the Orendain distillery in the heart of tequila country.
We have had Chinese importers come to visit the distillery, and they can judge the quality of the spirit simply by touching it to their tongues. They take a great deal of care in analyzing the components of each tequila.
Si tú lo mides en porcentaje, China es de los mercados que crecen más.
When you look at the percentages, China is one of our fastest growing markets, and that means opportunity for premium and ultra-premium tequila brands to grow in the Chinese market. The standard brands are growing in the market and promoting higher quality products.
As tequila breaks into ever more markets, it carries Mexico's image with it, what producers here see as the country's gift to the world. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, in Tequila, Mexico.
Let's look at the commodities market, and gold prices edged higher today and were on track for a 7th consecutive weekly gain as investors awaited U.S. employment data that could influence expectations about aggressive policy easing by the Federal Reserve. Crude oil prices, on the other hand, fell as concerns over the outlook for global economic growth outweighed elevated tensions in the Middle East that could disrupt supply routes and send prices higher. This is Global Business, still ahead. The demand from the Chinese market leads to a boom in Senegal's peanut industry. And Tanzania's biggest trade fair is in full swing in Dar es Salaam.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Relations between China and Senegal opened up a breadth of opportunities for both countries. One of the sectors benefiting from the demand of the Chinese market is the country's peanut industry. CGTN's Asta Tal went to Kaolack to find out more about how an open market and Chinese interest has led to a boom in the sector.
These boys are on vacation and tilling their family fields. They might look dry now, but when the rainy season comes, these peanut fields become part of a booming industry. The growth is due to an increased demand from the Chinese market for peanut-based products. In 2014, Senegalese President Macky Sall and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed to enhance cooperation in areas such as Senegalese agricultural products. This, paired with the liberalization of the peanut market, led to a boom in the sector.
I can say we have assisted with a peanut revolution in Senegal, thanks to the opening of the Chinese market, because it always used to be much more competitive on the local and global market.
Farmers are now able to sell their harvest at a more competitive price.
The arrival of the Chinese made it so we're able to sell a large quantity at a good price. Let me give you an example. If the state is buying at 210 francs CFA per kilo, then they can buy it 250 francs CFA per kilo.
Kaolack is part of Senegal's peanut basin. Taïba Niassène, a commune an hour away from the city of Kaolack, acts as the country's dehulling center. Habib operates 300 dehulling centers, each with a capacity of 30 tons. He also acts as a president of the collective of peanut grain producers and exporters. According to him, in the November 2018 to the June 2019 season, the peanut industry employed 21,000 people in Kaolack.
Every year, I go to China to do prospecting and to learn how to process Senegalese grains. I think the second step is also increasing the technology transfer of new methods. Being able to add more to the value chain helps producers create an industry. It creates a secure environment, allowing the producers to have a better future.
In Kaolack alone, over 374,000 tons of peanuts were exported in 2018. According to estimates from the Senegalese government, in 2016, around 65% of peanuts were exported to China. The boom has led to investment in projects such as a rehabilitation of the port of Kaolack, which would be able to ship tons of peanuts straight to China instead of having trucks go to Dakar.
This partnership has helped producers become real entrepreneurs. This is what is interesting about our partnership with China. It has resulted in a boost of production because people know that they can gain a lot from cultivating peanuts. It has also increased our exports. We know in Senegal we have a trade deficit. So by exporting, we bring equilibrium in our trade balance.
As the partnership between both markets continues to grow, producers such as Habib are looking towards the future and hoping to add to the value chain by having more finished peanut products made in Senegal, such as peanut oil. Astatal, CGTN, Kaolack, Senegal.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on South Africans to embrace the fourth industrial revolution. Ramaphosa made the remarks at an inaugural Digital Economy Summit in Johannesburg. The event was held in partnership with the public and private sectors as well as the civil society. CGTN's Zulisa Njamela has the details.
President Cyril Ramaphosa brought together public and private sector players at this summit. He wants to turn around the economic fortunes of South Africa, looking to digital technology to drive the country's GDP growth rate. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, or 4IR Digital Economy Summit, also included technology companies, executives, and government officials.
And given what we know today about the potential benefits about what the fourth industrial revolution can yield, we must embrace this historic confluence of human insights and engagement, artificial intelligence and technology to rise to the challenges, to be able to enable us to address poverty, inequality, as well as unemployment, which is the biggest triple problem that we face in our country. This revolution must be harnessed and placed at the disposal of the programs of transformation on which our country has embarked on since 1994.
Using the latest digital technologies and platforms, South Africa also stands to transform the outlook of our economy by ensuring that government services, trade, banking, and infrastructure delivery are carried out in a smart and efficient manner.
The summit's theme is positioning South Africa to be globally competitive in the fourth industrial revolution. 4IR South Africa is an alliance between the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies and a number of telecommunication companies, some universities here in South Africa. The partnership now also includes global technology giant Huawei. Huawei has been in South Africa for 2 decades, helping the country build its network. The company believes AI or artificial intelligence will change the way we view the world.
AI will change the world. And we also think the more traditional industry will be more benefits of the AI technology used. For Huawei, we have an opinion. The AI will be influenced all the industry and also will be changed the job ecosystem. Everyone knows this story. 100 years ago, when the car coming, and all the horse drivers are complained. The car will destroy my job. But don't forget, the industry revolutions generate more jobs than the horse